Bava Kamma Daf Tzadi Gimel is the last Amud of the 8th parak, first Amud of the 9th parak. The last Amud discusses a bit more Agadata about Sefer Bereshis before going back to the most recent Mishnah and discussing somebody gives permission to injure or to damage himself. And then we'll get to the 9th parak, which talks about the halachas of theft and kinyin gizela and returning things that were stolen. So let's begin. The Gemara quotes a statement said by Rav Chanan, somebody who asks Shamayim to judge his friend, he himself will be punished first. You see that from Sarai and Avram. Sarai said to Avram, Chamasi alacha, my suffering is upon you. And then it says, Avram, meaning that Sarah died first. She's the one who was judged first. It says Gemara, this is only true that one should not give din to Shamayim if he has a recourse here in Dine Adam. However, if he has no recourse here in Dine Adam, he's allowed to ask Shamayim to get involved. It says Rav Yitzchak, if somebody complains about someone who's bothering him, it'll be just as bad for him, even worse for him, than it is for the one that he's complaining against. We have a brisa that says that when someone screams to Hashem, the one who screams and the one who screamed about are both included, except that the one who screamed about, the one who screams, he gets looked at first. And this is based on the pasuk where it says, "V'char api v'arakti eschem," and that's referring to someone who screams to Hashem. So it says plural, you and him, both you and the one you're screaming against. Hashem's going to take a good close look at each of you. Says Rav Yitzchak further, the curse of a regular person should never be light to you, should never be meaningless to you, because Avimelech was no tzaddik by any stretch of the imagination, cursed Sarah, and it was fulfilled through her children. He said to her, Hine hu l'cha ksus inayim, it's a covering for your eyes. He theoretically meant that this will cover for you, that people won't think that anything happened. The fact that he's giving money, it'll be clear that he was forced to give her up, so that people won't think that he was actually maneser. However, what it literally means is that it's a covering for your eyes, meaning that it should induce blindness, and this was fulfilled through Sarah's son Yitzchak, as the pasuk says, "V'hiki zakin Yitzchak v'atkichena einav meir ois." Says Rabbi Avo, a person should always be from those who are pursued and not from the pursuers, because there is no bird pursued as much as a pigeon and a young dove, and those are the ones that the Torah says are kosher for the mizbeach. Okay, now the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. In the Mishnah we had seen two categories of injuries that one invites to himself. That is, if someone says, cut off my hand, my foot, my nose, or if someone says, destroy my clothing. So one is about the body, one is about possessions. The Gemara is going to bring in a third category, which is about the body, but not losing a limb, just to cause pain, like hit me, wound me, or anything along those lines. Now, the Gemara wants to know, let us try it in the Mishnah where we saw that there's a difference between a harm to the body and a harm to one's possessions. That if he says, Amanas liftar, if he says that you can do this to me and be pater, if he's talking about his body, we said that the patur is not chal, and the person who listens to him is chayiv to pay for it anyway, as opposed to in his possessions where we do believe him and he is chal. And if he says you'll be pater, then the person who follows through on that actually is pater. So where it says, what's pshat? This is a question that was asked by Rav Asi Bar Chama to Rava, and Rava answered the difference is very simple. A person means it when he says it about his possessions. He doesn't mean it when he says it about the body. If he says, cut off my limbs, he's obviously, it's not possible that he means literally that he should cut it off and be pater. So the Gemara asks, but what do you mean? We have a brisa that discusses the middle case, and that's an injury, like hit me, hurt me, and all those things. And over there, if he says do it and you'll be pater, the person really is pater. It fits in the category in our Mishnah of the possessions, not of the body. So your explanation that a person is not meichel pain to the body it does not hold up in this brisa, because then he shouldn't be pater here in the brisa either. So this was Rava's question back to Rav Asi Bar Chama. Rav Asi Bar Chama was quiet. He didn't have an answer. And then he said, did you hear anything about it? He said, this is what Rav Shesha said. Rav Shesha said that the mechila is no good because it's embarrassing for the family. Therefore, he has no right to be meichel for the family. That's true for losing a limb. It's not true for destroying possessions, and it's not true for causing pain personally, there is no embarrassment to the family in general in that sense. Now the Gemara brings more opinions as to how we define what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Rav Oishi has said that the reason is pagam mishpacha, embarrassment to the family. Like Rav Shesha said, Rava himself says that a person is not meichel on his Rashi Ivarim, on his limbs, and therefore that's the thing that when he says you'll be a potter, that doesn't count for. Other things it will. Rabbi Yochanan says it could go either way. It depends on his tone of voice. If he says it seriously, then it could be serious. If he says it sarcastically, then there is no patur there. The way Rabbi Yochanan expresses this is he says sometimes yes means no and sometimes no means yes. Depends if it's said seriously or if it's said sarcastically. In one quotes a brisa, somebody who says hit me, wound me, and the person asks to him, and I'll be putter, and he says, yeah. So that's obviously sarcastic. If it's phrased as an answer to a question, will I be putter, that's sarcastic. If he says, however, tear my clothing, and you'll be putter, and he says no, and then he says no, so that's no is also sarcastic there, and he really means yes. So no could sometimes mean yes, yes could mean no, depending on sarcasm or serious tone of voice. The Gemara now focuses on the last part of the Mishnah where we had seen the halacha that if someone says rip my clothing, unless he says and be putter, the person's chayiv if he rips it. He has to specify and be putter, otherwise he's still chayiv. So there has a contradiction to that. The Torah says in the Parsha of Shomrim that if you give something to a shomer to watch and he is posheya in it, he has to pay for it. It's only if you give it to him to watch. If you give it to him to destroy, to rip, or to give out to other people, then you've already lost possession of it, and there's no claim. You can't claim it back from him if it gets destroyed. Even if it never reaches the goal that you set for it, and it gets ruined, once you've given it to him, you've lost control over it. So the kasha here is that it says that if you gave it to him to destroy, he's putter, even though you didn't say and be putter. So our mission is mashma if you say to him destroy it and you don't say be putter, he's chayiv. Here it says if you give it to him to destroy, he is putter, without saying and you'll be putter. So that's Gemara's kasha. Gemara gives two answers. Gemara's first answer is Rav Huna, who says no. It's only where it depends if it got to his hands or if it didn't get to his hands. Once it actually gets his hands, he's now responsible for it. And therefore, if he goes ahead and destroys it, he's going to be chayiv unless he said explicitly that he'll be pater. However, if he destroyed it before he ever took possession of it, there he would be pater all the time. So Mara asks, when the Torah says the drasha, if the Brisa quotes the drasha, that it has to be lishmar for him to be chayiv, and he gives it to him la'abid, then he's pater. That applies even if it got to his hands. It says if the arrangement was lishmar, he's chayiv. If the arrangement was la'abid, it's pater. That implies that it got to him either way, and it depends what you said. So therefore, this answer doesn't work. So therefore, the Gemara gives another answer. Rabba says that they're each speaking about where it came to his hands. The question is, in what condition it came to his hands? Did it come to him to be watched, or it came to him to be destroyed? It came to him to be watched, and he later changed his mind and said, you know what, destroy it. There he has to say explicitly that you will be pater. If ever you gave it to him in order to destroy, then you don't have to say be pater. That's the entire reason that you gave it to him, and it's obvious that you mean for it to be destroyed and for him to be pater for it. The Gemara quotes a case where there was a purse of tzedakah, came to Pompadisa, and Rav Yosef was the gabbai tzedakah, and he gave it to a certain individual to watch. That individual was pesheya, and it got stolen. So Rav Yosef was mechayim to pay for it. So Abaye was Rav Yosef, was a Talmud, he asked, but we said you're only chayiv if you gave it to him to watch, not if you gave it to him to give out to other people. This is money that was given to him to distribute to others. So he's not responsible for it, so why should it be chayiv? So the Gemara answers now, the reason why you're generally not responsible if you give it to him to give out to Anim is because who's going to claim it? The owner doesn't own it anymore because you gave it to him to give out. Anim can't claim it because it's not theirs. And that, Rav Yosef is saying, in Pompadisa, they all get a fixed amount of time, they get a fixed amount of tzedakah, and therefore they could come claim. They are used to what they're supposed to get, and they know what they're supposed to get, and therefore they come claim it, and that's why he's chayiv for it. This concludes the 8th parak, Parak HaChayvo. Now we start Parak HaGozel. The first sugya is that of when you steal something, you have to return it. So we know that the halacha is that you have to steal the thing which you have to return the thing which you stole. If the thing is not in existence anymore, if it's been changed, then the whatever it is now belongs to the thief, and he has an obligation to pay the value of what he stole. So the Mishnah says you calculate the value at the time of the theft. You don't look at what it's worth now because you changed it. At the time of the theft, what was it worth? That's what you need to pay. If you did a kinyan gzela, kinyan shinoi with gzela. So the Mishnah gives a couple of examples. If somebody stole wood and made it into kalim, or if he stole wool and made it into clothing, so there's a shinoi there. Therefore, he now owns the kalim, the clothing. He doesn't have to give it back. He does have to pay the value of the wood that he stole at the time that he stole it, and the value of the wool that he stole at the time that he stole that. If he stole a pregnant cow or a sheep that needed to be shorn, and they gave birth or they were shorn in his possession, so the vlad, the child that's born, the calf that's born is considered to be shinoi. That changed. The wool that's cut off is considered to be shinoi. He gets to keep that. What does he need to pay? He has to pay for a cow that at that stage of pregnancy that it was. There's a more value in that over what the cow is worth now, but he has to pay that value. And whatever is worth more than that, to have an unpregnant cow plus the calf, that extra he can keep. And the same thing applies to the wool that he shore off. He has to pay the value of a sheep waiting to be shorn. The wool that he's shorn, he gets to keep. The sheep he gets to keep, and that increased value, which is more than the sheep's worth now, but less than the two together, he has to pay that. Now, says the Mishnah, what happens if he stole a cow and it became pregnant by him? Or if he stole a sheep and it grew wool and now it needs to be shorn, but the wool grew by him. So again, you have to pay kishas gzela. You have to pay what it was worth at the time that it was stolen. And then the Mishnah puts down the rule: anyone who steals pays like the value it was at the time of the theft. Now again, the Gemara asks that we skip the stage of shinoi. When we had the example of wood that was turned into furniture, or wool that was turned into clothing, so there's a step between. That's when you take the wood and you polish it, you make it smooth, and then you can make it into furniture. Or if you take the clothing and you spin it into thread, or you bleach it, you make it clean. So that is a step in between. So when this person, if he started with the raw wood in stage 1, and he turned it to stage 3, he should already be kind of kinyan shinoi when he got to stage 2. So why do we only say when he got to stage 3 he doesn't have to return it and he only pays kishas gzela? Should say when he got to stage 2. The Gemara says the fact that it didn't say stage 2, that implies that that's not called a valid shinoi. Only going from 1 to 3 is a valid shinoi. So that the Gemara asks if a Brisa says otherwise. The Brisa says if somebody stole wood and polished it, meaning he got to stage 2, or if he stole stones and he smoothed them out, or if he stole wool and he bleached it, flax and he cleaned it from the psilas, all these things he pays kashas gzela, meaning all these things are considered to be a shini and he's clean and he only has to pay the value. And all these things are from stage 1 to stage 2. So why does our Mishnah imply only going from stage 1 to stage 3? So Abaye answers, our Mishnah is not talking about going from stage 1 to stage 3. Our Mishnah is talking about going from stage 2 to stage 3. And our Mishnah is saying a bigger chiddush. From stage 1 to stage 2 is a shinoi d'oraisa. From stage 2 to stage 3 is a shinoi d'rabbanan. And the reason is because it's reversible. If you have already finished polished wood and you make it into a box, then you can just take the box apart and it'll go back to being what it was before. If you have threads and you weave it into a shirt, you could just undo it and put it back and you'll have threads just like before. However, that's all stage 2 to stage 3. However, to go from stage 1 to stage 2, to take the wood and sand it and finish it and smooth it, or to take the wool and to actually spin it into thread, that can't be undone. And therefore, that's what we call a shinoi d'oraisa. That's a shinoi. This is only shinoi d'rabbanan. So our Mishnah's cases are all talking about shinoi d'rabbanan, and it mentions them as a bigger chiddush, that even these count as a shinoi. Rav Ashi gives a different answer. Rav Ashi says, in our Mishnah, we're also talking about shinoi d'oraisa. We're talking about where you took from stage 1 to stage 3, actually. However, we're talking about where you skipped stage 2, there was no stage 2. So wood, for example, you made a buchani, which skips the smoothing stage. You don't have to smooth it out, you just make it out of rough wood. It is, perhaps it's a grinder, you don't have to have that. When you made clothing out of it, so you made it out of felt, so you took the mass of fibers of the wool and just flattened it, smoothed it, pressed it flat into cloth, didn't actually spin it at any point, and therefore that's why that stage is not there. Umar now asks, he brought me a brisa that bleaching is considered to be a shinoi. I bring a raya that this brisa says the bleaching is not a shinoi. The brisa discusses if somebody was supposed to give Reishas Geis, the first of his shearings, to the kohen, but he bleached it first, so he's still chayiv to give it to the kain. It's not a shinoi. If, however, he bleached it and then he colored it, now it's considered to be a shinoi. It's not the same thing. He doesn't have to give it to the kain anymore. He's not going to be mekayim the mitzvah, but it's no longer what it is. He stole it. It is a shinoi. No one can actually claim it because there's no kain who had the right to it, but it's considered to be shinoi. So you see, the bleaching itself is not a shinoi. Contradiction to the brisa before the bleaching is a shinoi. If he answers, Abai says this is not a kasha. It's a machlekes Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. Merkot to brisa, discussing when can you combine multiple sheep together to make one reishis hagez. Generally, reishis hagez is supposed to be a significant amount, like the amount that comes from 5 sheep. So the brisa says that if you shore the sheep, spun it into threads, and wove it into cloth, then you can no longer call it reishis hagez. You can't be mitzvah if these different sheep to reishis hagez. That's you did the first sheep, did all 3 steps, then did the second sheep, then you did the second sheep, all 3 steps, then the third, all 3 steps, and so on and so forth. They don't combine. If, however, all you did was bleach it between each one, so you have machlekes. Reb Shimon says it's not mitzaref, it still can be, it's still separate. And the Chachamim say no, it is mitzaref. So there you see machlekes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim, and that's our machlekes here, whether or not bleaching it is considered to be a shinoi. Rava gives a different answer. He says this whole Rabbi Shimon, the difference between the brises are, one is when you combed it with your fingers, one is when you combed it with a comb. Rav Chia bar Avin says that one is where you whitened it just by coloring it white with white paint. The other one is where you actually bleached it with sulfur, which bleaches it in the most pure way. The Gemara now asks, how can we entertain the possibility that bleaching is a shinoi according to Reb Shimon, even coloring it, which comes after bleaching, is not a shinoi according to Reb Shimon. Merkot to brisa, if you shore it one at a time, color them one at a time, and spun it into clothing one at a time, according to Bava Kamma, it's not mitzvah according to Reb Shimon ben Yehuda. In the name of Reb Shimon, coloring is mitzaref. The weaving is not mitzaref, coloring is mitzaref. So you see, if the coloring is mitzaref, then it's not a shinoi according to Rabbi Shimon. So then how could bleaching be a shinoi if even coloring is not a shinoi? So Abai says not a kasha. One is Rabbanan according to Rabbi Shimon, one is Reb Shimon Yehuda according to Rabbi Shimon. And Rava says a different answer. No, there is no machlekes between the Rabbanan according to Rabbi Shimon and Reb Shimon and Yehuda. The name of Rabbi Shimon, actually coloring it is less of a shinoi than bleaching it, assuming you didn't bleach it before you colored it. Because coloring can be undone. You can wash it out with soap. Bleaching can be returned back to state it was before. Now, the brisa which we said, in which a person did a shinoi to it before he gave it to the kain that he's pater, and there we said coloring is a shinoi. So that's a different type of coloring. That's where if he colored it with kala ilan, which is a color similar to tcheles that can't be washed out, and therefore that's not reversible.